It begins with a letter, not a scream, not a witness, not even a body. Just a letter, cold, calculated, and dripping with menace. A man claiming responsibility for murder, daring the police to catch him, taunting the press, and threatening even more bloodshed if his demands weren't met. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted to be remembered. He called himself the Zodiac. In the late 1960s, Northern California was gripped by a fear that spread like wildfire. Couples parked in quiet, secluded areas suddenly found themselves vulnerable, watched, and hunted. The attacks were brutal, precise, and seemingly random. But what truly set this killer apart wasn't just the violence, it was the mind behind it. A mind that craved attention, that played games, and that left behind cryptic messages as if the murders were just pieces in a much larger puzzle. The first confirmed attack happened on December 20, 1968. A young couple, just teenagers, parked near a quiet area outside Vallejo, California. It was supposed to be a peaceful night. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. A man approached their car under the cover of darkness and opened fire without warning. The boy died at the scene. The girl clung to life long enough to tell a fragmented story, but the killer was already gone. At the time, it seemed like a tragic but isolated crime. But 6 months later, on July 4, 1969, history repeated itself. Another young couple. Another secluded location. Another sudden, violent attack. This time, the male victim survived long enough to describe the shooter, a white male, stocky build, with a calm, almost emotionless demeanor. But again, the killer vanished into the night. Then came the phone call. A man called the police shortly after the attack, calmly reporting the crime and taking credit for both shootings. His voice was steady, almost detached, as if he were describing something trivial. That call marked the first time the killer directly communicated with authorities. But it wouldn't be the last. Weeks later, 3 newspapers received nearly identical letters. Each contained details only the killer could know, along with a cryptogram, a coded message. The sender demanded that the letters be published on the front page, or he would kill again. The newspapers complied. Amateur codebreakers eventually cracked one of the ciphers. The message was chilling. It spoke of killing as a form of pleasure, comparing it to hunting animals. It claimed that the victims would become slaves in the afterlife. But most unsettling of all, the message ended without revealing the killer's identity. He wanted to be known, but not caught. From that point on, the Zodiac killer became more than just a murderer. He became a symbol of fear. A phantom who could strike at any moment, anywhere. And he wasn't done. On September 27, 1969, the killer struck again, this time in broad daylight. A couple relaxing by a lakeside in Napa County were approached by a man wearing a bizarre costume. He had a black hood covering his face, with a symbol stitched onto his chest, a circle with a cross through it. The symbol would become infamous. The man tied the couple up before stabbing them repeatedly. The female victim survived. The male victim later died from his injuries. Before leaving, the killer calmly walked to their car and wrote a message on the door, listing the dates of his previous attacks and signing it with his symbol. He was escalating. Just 2 weeks later, the Zodiac killer committed his most brazen act yet. In the city of San Francisco, a cab driver picked up a passenger. It seemed like a routine fare. But when they reached their destination, the passenger pulled out a gun and shot the driver in the head. This time, witnesses saw the suspect. A police officer even responded to the scene and briefly encountered a man matching the description, but due to a miscommunication, he was allowed to walk away. It was one of the greatest missed opportunities in the case. Shortly after, another letter arrived at a newspaper. Inside was a piece of the victim's bloody shirt, proof that the writer was indeed the killer. The letter mocked the police, ridiculing their inability to catch him. It even described how he had been stopped and released. The Zodiac wasn't just killing. He was playing a game, and he was winning. As the months passed, more letters arrived. Some included additional ciphers, many of which remain unsolved to this day. Others contained bizarre threats, including plans to target school buses. The fear spread beyond secluded areas and into everyday life. Parents were terrified. Children were kept under watch. The killer had achieved something few criminals ever do. He had changed behavior on a massive scale. But despite the panic, the investigation struggled. The Zodiac left behind fingerprints, but they didn't match anyone in the system. Sketches were created based on witness descriptions, but no one could positively identify him. The letters were analyzed for handwriting and linguistic patterns, but the results were inconclusive. Every clue seemed to lead nowhere. One of the most fascinating aspects of the case is the ciphers. The Zodiac sent multiple coded messages, challenging the public and authorities to decipher them. While some were eventually cracked, others remain unsolved decades later. Experts believe they may contain his identity, or they could simply be elaborate distractions. Then there are the letters themselves. The tone shifts between arrogance, humor, and outright menace. The writer seems intelligent, calculating, and deeply narcissistic. He craves attention but operates with extreme caution. So who was he? Over the years, several suspects have been proposed. One of the most well-known was a man with a troubled past and a fascination with cryptography and weapons. He lived in the area, matched the physical description, and had connections to some of the locations. But despite circumstantial evidence, nothing could definitively link him to the crimes. Another theory suggests the killer may have been someone with military or law enforcement experience. His ability to evade capture, his calm demeanor, and his apparent knowledge of investigative techniques point to someone trained, or at least highly observant. Some believe the Zodiac wasn't just one person at all. The differences in handwriting, the varying methods of attack, and inconsistencies in the letters have led to speculation that multiple individuals could have been involved. But if that's true, how did they coordinate so flawlessly? And then, there's the darker theory. What if the Zodiac killer was never caught because he simply stopped? Not because he was identified, but because he chose to disappear. Some experts believe he may have died, moved away, or even changed his identity entirely. Others think he continued killing, but without the signature style that made him famous. There are even those who believe the Zodiac case holds elements we don't fully understand. The cryptic messages, the obsession with symbols, the almost theatrical nature of the crimes, it all feels deliberate. As if the killer was crafting a legacy, not just committing murders. Halfway through this story, take a moment. If you're drawn into mysteries like this, hit like, subscribe to Shadow Files, and share this video with someone who loves true crime. Because cases like this deserve to be remembered and maybe, one day, solved. Back to the case. One of the most haunting aspects of the Zodiac killer is the lack of closure. Officially, the case remains unsolved. Despite decades of investigation, advances in forensic science, and countless theories, no one has been definitively identified as the Zodiac. But the impact of his crimes still lingers. The locations where the attacks occurred have become part of a dark history. The letters are studied by experts and enthusiasts alike. The ciphers continue to puzzle even the most skilled codebreakers. And the question remains, how could someone commit such crimes, leave behind so many clues, and still vanish without a trace? In recent years, there have been renewed efforts to solve the case. Advances in DNA technology have allowed investigators to re-examine evidence. Partial profiles have been developed, but they haven't led to a conclusive match. It's as if the Zodiac planned for this, staying just one step ahead, even decades into the future. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Not the violence. Not the letters. Not even the ciphers. But the idea that someone could exist in plain sight, blending into society, carrying such darkness within them, and never being caught. As we come to the end of this story, one thing is certain. The Zodiac killer didn't just commit crimes. He created a legend. A mystery that refuses to fade. A shadow that still lingers over true crime history. If you've made it this far, you're now part of that story. So don't forget to like, subscribe to Shadow Files, and share this video. Because the more people who remember, the closer we get to the truth. And maybe, just maybe, one day, the Zodiac will finally be unmasked. Until then, the letters remain. The ciphers remain. And the silence remains.